morning, everyone, from sunny Redlands, California at Esri's headquarters. On behalf of the entire public safety team here at Esri, we welcome you to this webinar and really thank you for joining us. My name is Mike King. I manage our global market in regard to the emergency call taking industry. We also welcome one of our 911 partners, West Safety Service, who's joining us here on campus this week and are joining this webinar live. Please, to each of you who are listening in and watching, please feel free to type any questions that you might have. You don't need to hold those to the end. We'll try to answer them as we progress along. If it's something that we think the entire group would benefit from, we'll try to make that response verbally so that everyone hears it. Otherwise, questions will be answered within a few days, at which time you'll also receive a link with any relevant links and information attached to that. That will include a recording of this webinar, and we would invite you to share that recording with your network, especially those who you determine would benefit from seeing it. We want to thank Brenda, our associate in the public safety team, for managing this event, and Brenda will weigh in whenever necessary throughout the event, usually when we forget something on our end. So Brenda, thanks again for helping us out. I'd like to just go over the agenda quickly with you, and we'll follow this throughout the course of the event. We're going to immediately jump into addressing maps and apps for state and local government. We're really privileged to have two of our brightest stars at Esri with us. Scott Ottman leads this team of developers who are responsible for our ArcGIS for local government solution. Scott's been with Esri for a decade, and prior to that served as Oakland County, Michigan's Applications Services Division Manager. Scott's a graduate of Michigan State University with a degree in urban and regional planning, and prior to coming to work at Esri, he worked in public and private planning, including work for Johnson County and Franklin, Indiana. Kind of a sports nut and just a good guy. So thank you, Scott. And Scott is joined by his colleague, Chris Fox, who's a product engineer with Esri for the past 11 years, where he provides support in software products and customer management. Chris is responsible for developing our maps and apps that help local government implement ArcGIS throughout their organization. When Scott and Chris complete their section, which will last about 30 to 35 minutes, we then have invited the Southeastern Pennsylvania Regional Task Force, Stacey Atika and Andrew Smart, to present what great work they have been doing in Pennsylvania. Stacey is a GIS services lead for Chester County with nearly 20 years of experience specializing in enterprise GIS, including providing GIS and 911 support for the PSAPs and emergency operations centers. Andrew is a senior GIS consultant with over 12 years of experience. He has a broad range of experience ranging from local government, utilities, public safety, and emergency management. He specializes in designing GIS architectures both for on-premise and in-cloud environments. So this is really a neat opportunity to have him share some of what he has come up with in this consortium as we see cloud becoming more important to government. He's designed systems used in major events, including national security events and day-to-day operations. Again, any questions we can field throughout the webinar, or we'll try to hit them at the end. And at this point, I just again express my thanks to all the presenters for taking time out. And with that, we'll move into our first section with Scott Ottman and Chris Fox. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Okay, you guys, thank you for joining us today. Chris and I wanted to take some time to share with you the work we've been doing to help local governments and other agencies organize address information and share that with key stakeholders in their organization. And before we dive in and show you the specific solution offerings, we want to take a minute to just set some context. So Esri is continuing to evolve ArcGIS, and historically you'd think about ArcGIS as desktop, server, and mobile technology that many of you are probably using in your organization. But over the last several years, we've really been evolving ArcGIS as a product offering or as a platform to include a whole host of SaaS offerings we call ArcGIS Online, content that you can use immediately in your organization to make better decisions and inform citizens in your community, and a whole set of ArcGIS solutions that ultimately help you quickly configure and deploy ArcGIS and ultimately leverage the investment you're making in your geospatial data and technology. So these ready-to-use maps and apps can be easily configured in your organization, and they're fully supported like other aspects of ArcGIS. And one of the great things about the solution offerings is they're freely available. So they come with your ArcGIS subscription and can be used immediately in your organization. Now, Chris and I are part of a team that works every day on the local government solutions, but what you'll see is we also have solution offerings that are available for a variety of other industries we support, like utilities and telecommunication, military and security, and a great deal of offerings beyond what we're going to talk about today for addresses for the public safety and emergency management community too. So the ArcGIS for Local Government solution includes a whole set, probably more than 150 solution offerings that are organized around specific use cases and workflows within a local government, and they're configurable and extensible and freely available and fully supported. So one aspect of the work is the technology we're building to help you leverage that investment in ArcGIS and ultimately quickly configure and deploy solutions that maximize geospatial technology in your organization. But the other aspect of our work is a whole community of users that are sharing best practices and ultimately driving what we're building in the solution offerings and how we're evolving it from one release to another. And the addressing solutions that we'll show you guys today actually have been around for many years and have gone through several releases that are a direct result of the feedback that you have provided as a community. And so we like to say it very much as a participatory sport that you can leverage, and you'll get out of it what you put into it. So the final leg of our stool we just want to talk about for a minute is a network of Esri services and partner offerings that are available for organizations that may need help implementing the solutions we provide, extending them to meet specific needs in their organization, or even sustaining them over time. So we're really laser focused on helping local government organizations, in particular in our team, deliver maps and apps quickly throughout their organization. And really, you can start to think about the solutions that Esri provides as a standard set of capabilities that every organization can have. Ultimately, we know that many organizations ultimately struggle with the continuous evolution of our technology, and staying current is a real challenge. And so by providing these configurable apps, it reduces the amount of custom development you need to do in your organization and ultimately helps you save time and money. Addresses are one of those great geospatial data sets that are used by many, and so we want to help you unlock geospatial information in your organization so it can be leveraged by the entire organization. And ultimately, we know we can't do this on our own, so we want to leverage the collective knowledge of the entire community, share best practices, incorporate industry tradecraft into the software, and ultimately make it easier for you to just leverage your investment in ArcGIS. So as I mentioned, there are probably 130 to 150 different solutions available for local governments in our ArcGIS for Local Government solution, and we're really going to focus today on our addressing maps and apps. And you'll see the solutions we have available are really focused around two key user personas. One is a local government organization who really is the custodian or manager of that authoritative data. And as many of you know, address data is one of the fundamental data sets in a city or county, and it's used everything from 911 to permitting workflows, assessment and taxation workflows, elections, and even water and sewer billing and human resources. And so we're really going to focus on the local government use cases today, but do know that we've also been working with our counterparts on the state government team to ensure that that address information that we manage in a local level can be aggregated and rolled up and made available for a whole variety of statewide initiatives like NextGen 911, environmental permitting, voter registration, and even human service workflows as well. So let's jump right into the local government solutions and talk more about them specifically. So today, Chris and I are going to show you a whole collection of maps and apps that are configured on top of ArcGIS to really help with address data management and related workflows in your organization. And we're going to start with kind of the most fundamental solution offering, and that is our address data management solution. And that really is a configuration of ArcMap that can be used by mapping technicians in your organization to maintain road centerline, facilities, site addresses, and related postal addresses. So it's all about getting information from record documents that you have in your organization into your GIS system so that data can be used in an authoritative address inventory and then shared with a whole variety of users in your community. I'm then going to hand it over to Chris, and he's going to show you how you can really continuously improve your address quality over time and run a whole series of checks with Data Reviewer for addresses and even extend that workflow beyond field verification and address crowdsourcing. And then ultimately share that information with other stakeholders and aggregate that information maybe into larger data sets across your community. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with a demonstration of our address data management solution. And so let me come out here to ArcMap and just get started. So when you download the address data management solution, what you'll find is that you get an ArcMap document that's really optimized for mapping technicians in your organization, a whole set of layers that help you organize your address information, and then a set of tools that you can use to really optimize the address data management workflow. And all of this is included when you download the solution from the solution site. And you'll see that this address data management map is really set up and optimized for folks that need to add that authoritative address information from those record drawings to your address inventory. So I'm just going to use an example of a new commercial development in the community to really highlight some of the key capabilities of this address data management solution. And we're going to start by adding this new development or commercial development to our map. And ultimately, you'll see how this information begins to come to life with a series of construction tools. So what I'm going to do here is select a new facility. And ultimately, you can think about these in the public safety space as common places in your community. And I'm going to use the parcel boundaries here to kind of quickly go in and add this new facility to my map. And you'll see once I add that, there's some key attributes that are important to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and quickly populate these. Development. And I could add some detailed information about that development, but ultimately this is a simple private development in the community. And just with a few clicks of the map, I've added that development. I may also want to have a point representation that I could load into my dispatch system for that facility. So let's go ahead and create another representation of that facility site. And so now with just a few clicks on the map, I've got that new common place which represents the new development added to my map. And you can see that the attributes for that facility have been populated for me. So let's go ahead and turn off those facilities though and start adding the new information for this development to our address inventory. So one of the fundamental things you'll see about the address data management map is it really relies heavily on authoritative inventory of street names in your community. Many of you may call this your master street name inventory. So before I add this new development, what I'm going to do here is come in and add the new street names that are part of that new development. So I'm going to go ahead and just populate the individual street name elements. You'll see we've incorporated a lot of the national standards into this related table, and as I add the individual road name elements, it's populating a full road name for me, and then ultimately allowing me to track some alias information, whether that is a valid street name just in one community or my entire community, county maybe, and ultimately whether it's a pending road name or an official road name for my community. So with just a few clicks there, I've added that master street name, and you'll see in a few minutes how I can take advantage of that. So now that we've got the new road names in, let's start by adding the actual local street. And one of the challenges many people have is how do I maintain the integrity of my existing data as I'm adding new roads and new addresses to my inventory. So you'll see that I just clicked on North Mill Street here, and it's got some existing address ranges and centerline ID numbers that are critical to my geospatial data. But what I want to do now is add that new street. So it's a local street, it's a simple local street, and you'll see with the address data management map, there's actually a new tool that helps me split that or create the new road and split the intersecting road. So I'm just going to come in here and identify where the new road's going to go in or the curb cut and place this simple cul-de-sac for this commercial development. And what you'll see as I do that is what it's actually done is split North Mill Street for me and prorated the address ranges and maintained the parity. So I don't have to go back and clean up that information. It just maintains the integrity of that data as I'm doing it. And all I have to do at this point is actually come in and add the characteristics to the new road. So this is a simple cul-de-sac. We'll just populate some road address ranges on it. I'll come in here and now type in the first few characters, of that road name, and you'll see that it's actually looking at the master street name inventory to give me a valid set of road names that meet that characteristic. And once I populate that, it then populates it on the actual road centerline feature, and you'll see that it also pre-calculated some additional values for me. So in a few simple clicks, I've added that new road, I've populated the address ranges, and ensured that I have a valid street name on that road centerline feature. So let's just keep going. The next thing I may want to do is, this is a pending development, right, that may have shown up in my planning department. It's going through the approval process, and one of the important things I want to do is get the address information on those facilities as quickly as possible, just in case an emergency incident were to occur and I might need to dispatch someone to it. So the next thing I may want to do is actually use the site plan drawings that I have to populate some pending addresses for me. So you'll see when I select the pending site address location here, I have a new construction tool that allows me to use that center line I just placed to populate a new potential address or site address or pending site address. And as I'm hovering over the road, it's using those address ranges that I populated a few minutes ago to actually give me a proposed address. So in this case, we'll just kind of create a real simple development. I'll have one address on the north here and one to the south. And ultimately what it's doing is using the address ranges and where I placed that address point along the road that represents the curb cut to give me some proposed addresses for that new development. And if I select here this individual address and take a look at the attributes, you'll see that what it's done is populate an address ID for me. It's used that location along the road to give me a proposed address number. It understands what the full road name is, created a full address for me, populated the place name or common place name for that address too, using the facility layer we talked about a few minutes ago, giving me a USNG grid coordinate value that I can use in emergency response situations if necessary, and giving me some additional metadata for that site address. So just in a few simple clicks, I can do that. And if I were to want to modify this address and maybe refine the address, I could do that at any point in time, and you'll see that it'll go ahead and automatically update that for me. The other thing I may want to do is that if this is maybe a commercial development that has additional building and unit information, I could populate that as well too. So in some cases, maybe we'll say this is building 1 and suite. Let's just go ahead and a simple example, right? I may want to add additional information on building 1 and suite 1, and as I continue to add that additional metadata about the units, or some people call those sub-addresses on that location, it's continuously updating my full address for me. And so it's a very, very simple way to maintain an authoritative inventory of all of my existing site addresses and do that in a real effective way. So now that I've got the new facility identified in my community, I've got the road names, or the new roads, populated and assigned some addresses. What I may want to do also is actually populate some mailing addresses for this. So you'll see that, we're trying to help organizations build that authoritative inventory of addresses. So you'll see a clear delineation between site addresses, where service is delivered or maybe where public safety responds to an incident, and mailing addresses, which is maybe where billing notices go out or assessment change notices go out. And so for any individual site address, I can come in here and add one or more mailing addresses. In this case, it automatically populated, it brought the site address over for me. I could modify that if I wanted, enter in the additional information about that site address. And once again, this is where you'll see we incorporated a lot of the national standards. So we have the Postal Service standards incorporated here already. And you can just go ahead and identify whether or not this is a owner, occupant, or owner-occupant situation. And so once again, you can have multiple mailing addresses for any given site addresses. And that information then can be shared with others in your organization. So the final thing I may want to do is actually provide some additional metadata for that site address. So many times what we've heard from cities is that in cases like where I have corner lots where the address may be assigned off of one street, but the actual most efficient way to get there for the public safety community is off another street. Condo developments are another good example of that, where all of the units are maybe addressed off of certain roads, and I want to identify which is the most efficient entrance into that condo unit. You know, there's ways to actually track that as well too in the address data management map. So in this case, I have that site address 194, and what I actually want to do is identify a driveway location that's more efficient for that. And so by simply selecting the driveway entrance, I can place that on the map. And now ultimately when I click on this site address we provided, what you'll see is what I have here now is the actual site address that was assigned and all the characteristics we showed earlier. I have the postal address that was created for that, and I have two additional pieces of information. That is the entrance point and the address point as well too. And now I have all of that information kind of tied together real quickly in an efficient way, and I don't need to worry about you know, the integrity of that data because it's all tied together for me in ArcGIS. So what have I showed you? I've shown you how you can go in and quickly create a new facility in your community or a commonplace location, add the new road center lines from that proposed development, populate a few site addresses, and even some additional metadata as well, like an entrance point and other key characteristics. Well, let's just wrap up kind of the workflow with kind of now that development comes through the whole entire planning process. Folks have you know, submitted the final plat or commercial development plan, and lo and behold, they're going to go in and change the actual road names, and they're going to change them from Spartan Alley to Gator Alley. And what you'll see now with a simple change in the master street name table, right, an update to that authoritative road name, the address data management map helps me go out and find where I have existing features that have those characteristics. And so I can populate the new center line we created and actually update the site addresses as well too. And so with a real simple refresh in the map, you can see that North Spartan Alley became North Gator Alley. And if I were to poke on the existing address here, you'll see that what was formerly North Spartan Alley is now North Gator Alley. And so just a few simple quick updates. I can now increase the integrity of that data and update that information as it moves from a pending address to maybe a final address in my community. So that's just a high-level overview of the address data management solution. As I said, it really is designed to help local mapping technicians, maybe in your planning department or public safety agency, take that authoritative data that you're getting as part of those new developments and quickly enter it into your ArcGIS system so you can then leverage that information throughout your organization. And what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Chris, and he's going to show you how you can take that authoritative data and begin to extend those workflows and improve the overall quality of your address data. So why don't you take it away, Chris?
Thanks, Scott. So I want to take some time to run through a few solutions that we have, as Scott mentioned, to extend or extend on after you've collected the data. Now we want to go through some process to see how we can improve the integrity or the accuracy of some of that address data. So the first solution that I want to show you is the Data Reviewer for Addresses, which provides a pre-configured ArcGIS Data Reviewer batch job that contains a series of checks that you can use to validate, maintain, and improve the integrity of your address data. These checks will test for errors in the attributes and the geometry of your addresses. For example, you can find center lines that have invalid edges, such as numbers that are null or zero, or where the from address is smaller than the to address, or the odds and even numbers are on the wrong side of the road. And you can further configure these checks to meet your organization's needs. We provide you this batch job that has a series of checks that might be useful, but you can extend that to meet the specific needs of your organization. So to get started, what you're going to do is from the Data Reviewer toolbar, you're going to start a new Data Reviewer session. I have one already created here, so I'll start that session. And then next, after you've started the session, you can run the batch check. So with this batch check, I can select different, based on whether I want to validate things within my current extent, or based on a definition query within the layer, I want to only validate certain features, or I can do the full or the full database and check everything. For this example, I'm going to focus on the current extent. I can add the batch job that's provided with the solution. And you can see after this batch job loads, we'll see the series of checks that are available that you could run against your data and validate the integrity of that address information. Here we go. So they're kind of broken into different categories, some default checks, checks on the domain, validation against geometry. I'm just going to go ahead and run all of these, and you can get a sense of what the output of that is. So it's going through and validating in my current extent, and it found 3 errors, and it wrote those to the reviewer table. So if I open the reviewer table, we can get a little more information about those errors. The first thing that I will like to do is symbolize those errors in the map so I can get a visual idea of where those errors are. I can then look at the check title, and let me expand this a little bit so you can see. So the first error says that the road centerline full road name must match the site address full road name. So what this check is saying is I have a site address point that has a road name that isn't within a certain distance of a centerline that has that same name. So it could be a typo or a subtle error in my data where I have an address that isn't really tied to a centerline that's near that address. If I look here in the map, if I hover over this, let me pin this table. So if I hover over this and get the tooltip, you can see it's saying it's 1325 Southwest Street. And if I look at the actual center line, it's actually Northwest Street. So a very subtle error that would be very difficult for me to find if I was just looking over my features. I might miss that, but Data Reviewer was able to catch that error. And because of this, now I can go ahead and resolve that issue. So let me start editing. I can select that feature. And open up the attributes, and you can see that its full road name is marked as Southwest, so I'm just going to mark that Northwest. Hit enter, save my edits, and then I can go back to my reviewer table, and I can enter a correction status. So I'm going to say that it's resolved per the guidance, and I'm going to say that I updated the road name. And hit apply. So the reason that this is important is this is written to a table in my geodatabase. At any point, I can go back and see a history of any edits that I've made. If anybody wants to see any of the errors that were created and how they were resolved, I have that history that I can always refer back to with any of the changes. The other error here that was raised is saying that the left value is greater than, the left from value is greater than the left to value. That might just be, again, another typo error where I entered the address ranges incorrectly. That's very easy to resolve as well. I can just change those and enter that correction status, and now I have that history of the changes that were made. So that's a quick overview of the data reviewer for addresses. Now let's look at some of our web solutions that you can use to enlist members of the community or other members in your organization to contribute missing site address points. So the first web application that I want to show you is the address crowdsourcing application. This is a configuration of ArcGIS Online and the GeoForm configurable application template that can be used by addressing authorities to enlist members of the general public or other members in your organization to contribute potentially missing site address points. They can do this from a web application on their desktop or their mobile device. So in this example, I'm going to search for an address here, 116 North Wright Street, and zoom in there. If we see in our map, we're actually missing a site address point for this building footprint. So this might be an address that I want to contribute to the authoritative address layer. So I'm going to enter the address here. It's just a building. It's in Naperville. enter my contact information. So if they want to contact me about this particular address, and hit submit. So now I've submitted that new address. As the addressing authority, I can then go in and review that address. And one of the applications that I might use to do that is our address field verification application. Address field verification is a configuration of collector for ArcGIS. And so if I go into collector, I can find my web map, my address field verification map. And this allows me to go out in the field and investigate some of those proposed site address points. So if I zoom in here, I can actually see when the person submitted it that myself put it in a slightly wrong location. So that might be something I could edit on the fly. So I can select that point, edit it. I'm just going to move it over here. So let's say while I'm on site, I actually discover that this building is an apartment and there's 3 units in that apartment. So that's something I can do right in the field from collector. So I'm going to change it to an apartment. I'm going to say the unit number is 100. And because I'm on site and I've verified that that is an address, I'm going to set the verified status to yes. And you can see the symbol change slightly. And I'm going to submit that. Well, the other thing that I want to do is I know there's 2 additional building units, so I want to quickly create those while I'm on site as well. So I'm going to create another one like this one. I'm going to place it over here. I'm going to change the unit number to 101 and hit submit. Oops. And again, quickly selecting the feature, copying it like this one, place another unit, building unit number 102, hit submit. And now I've created 3 new address sites that are available and have been verified in the field. I can then go back to my office and incorporate those back into my authoritative address layer. So I've submitted these into a community addressing layer that are temporary and they can be reviewed and you can go through a process to incorporate them. You could use ArcMap and the append tool to load these features into your authoritative layer. You could also use ArcGIS Pro and some of the new editing tools to copy and paste the features between different feature layers in your organization to move those into your authoritative layer. But this is a way you can solicit other members in your organization or the general public to contribute those missing site addresses and how you can go out in the field and validate those and collect new missing site address points. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Scott, who's going to summarize some of these solutions we talked about today.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I just want to take a few minutes and wrap it up before we turn it over to the folks from Pennsylvania. So everything Chris and I showed you today is available in the ArcGIS for Local Government solution. And if you go to solutions.arcgis.com, you can see that information. You'll see all of the solutions we provided today and showed you today. The other thing I would encourage you to do is really join the meetup community that we have, because it's a great way to stay connected with the team that we have at Esri and ultimately drive the work we're doing in the solutions. And many of the solutions we showed you today are actually 2nd and 3rd or even 4th releases of these offerings that we've had based on feedback we've been getting from the community. So the ArcGIS for Local Government solutions, and in particular the addressing solutions, are continuously evolving. And I just wanted to kind of summarize with some things that we've been thinking about and working on for future releases. So today we showed you a whole series of data management workflows, and in particular the address data management map that runs within ArcMap. It's a configuration of ArcMap and a whole set of layers that reside within your geodatabase. And we've been thinking about as how we can start to evolve those addressing solutions and start to make some of those capabilities available in some web-based data management tools so you can distribute those throughout your organization. Another piece of feedback we've heard from many people is that I'd like a simple way to kind of mark up addresses or provide feedback. Chris showed you today the address crowdsourcing solution, and that is a great way to begin to fill in the gaps and discover missing addresses that you may have in your community. But many people have said they want just a simple way to kind of redline and mark up the map and then feed that information to the addressing custodians who are ultimately going to be maintaining your authoritative inventory. The other thing we've been thinking about in particular for our next-gen 911 needs is how can we leverage some of the data aggregation solutions we have right now that are available for our site, specifically for site addresses, and begin to leverage them to aggregate road center lines and critical facilities, and even begin to aggregate authoritative administrative boundaries, which are a critical part of the work that many of you do in 911 as well too. And so we're constantly evolving those data aggregation solutions to help you drive the authoritative content you have to other stakeholders like regional COGS or even state agencies that are interested in that information. And finally, we're definitely keeping an eye on the new address guidelines that are evolving. We've been actively working with NENA and are looking at how we can begin to incorporate those guidelines when they are released. As I mentioned, we've already done a lot of work to incorporate the U.S. Postal Service and some of the FGDC standards. And so we're constantly evolving that and looking for ways that we can help you meet those requirements and meet those guidelines as necessary in your organization. So thanks a lot for the time today. Before I turn over to the folks from Pennsylvania, I just wanted to share a few additional website links with you. And certainly, we can take some questions, I think, Mike, at the end if we have any, or we'll try to answer those questions as we go. But at this point, why don't we turn it over to the folks from Pennsylvania and have them share their story.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today as we talk about a regional centerline project. My name is Stacey Atika, and I'm from Chester County GIS. With me is Andrew Smart from Geographic. So to begin, I want to give you a little bit of information about our task force in our region so that you know what we're dealing with here. Pennsylvania has several regional counterterrorism task forces whose purpose is to provide counterterrorism planning, preparedness, and response, among other things. In our area, the task force is a funding source for regional projects, and it's a big supporter of GIS use. Within that task force, we also have a group of 911 center directors who have gotten together and formed a group called Shared Services Group, where they coordinate on projects and issues facing public safety and 911 dispatch. This group is also considered the IT and communications subgroup within the regional task force in our area. This group is being very proactive in getting ready for next-gen 911. Their efforts include EZNet implementation, text to 911, resource coordination, and best practices standardization. They have also made sure that they are on the path to next-gen ready GIS data for use in their systems. They've included GIS staff from each county in the region. You can see the counties listed on the map there. Berks County is not officially part of our task force region, but they are working with us on this effort because they're involved with the PSAPs with us. We have been working with them for several years now. We are also GIS staff members who have been supporting the E911 systems for quite some time. Our directions from this group of directors were to get the region's GIS data ready for next-gen 911 and to make it NENA compliant. The directors understand that it takes time to get the data ready, and they have been very supportive in giving us that time and the funding that's been needed, which is excellent. So a little bit about our region in general. We are a pretty big region, being the Philadelphia area. We've a large population, a lot of 911 calls. In addition to daily occurrences that would cause people to call 911, we also do get a lot of big events here. We had the Pope's visit a couple of years ago. The Democratic National Convention was here last summer, and the NFL draft will be here shortly. So there's definitely always a lot going on here, and 911 definitely gets a workout. So some of the things that we looked at when we came together to start putting together our data for regional centerline project are common things that I think a lot of people with GIS who do projects have as concerns. What level of data completeness is everyone at in a group like this? Who's making the decisions? What boundaries? What data model do you use? How do you put it all together so that you can repeat that process on a regular basis to make sure that that data that you've put all that effort into is maintained properly? So we worked together quite a bit as a group. We went through a lot of these issues and talked about them quite a bit. There were some concerns initially about all of this because it is such a big group with a lot of players involved, and not one person or one entity is in charge of all of the others to maybe be a tiebreaker or a final decision maker with all of this. So when you have a situation like that, if there was a lack of consensus or any kind of roadblocks along the way, it's very possible that a project wouldn't get off the ground. And we've certainly had that in this region and other efforts, not necessarily related to 911. But going into that, some of that history was certainly hanging over us. Also going into it, there's a bit of a difference between the data requirements between E911 and NextGen 911. Some of it is because things are required now for NextGen that were not required before. It's also that each county was its own entity doing what they needed to for their systems and their users and customers, not in a vacuum, but kind of. So you can see that there are differences in the road type, whether it's all caps, mixed case, the thoroughfare designations. You can also see on the right that between the two counties, some data is duplicated just to cover first due out of your boundaries and things like that. So some of those things are, are some of the issues that we're dealing with and putting all of this together for a region. I would say there isn't much standardization regionally, although we're on the path to that now, definitely. Internal to each county, there's a lot of standardization and workflows and best practices, but people didn't really worry about what their neighbor was doing. So we've moved beyond that, which is good, and we have a much better directive with the NextGen piece since it's a requirement. We have to get there. We have to work together. And I think that's what was missing from previous efforts. There wasn't that directive that made us have to do it. We also have the standard data model. It's the NENA data model. While it's not finalized yet, we have decided to use it, and that was a great decision for us so that we could keep moving forward. But in other efforts that we had, a data model wasn't in place quite like that. And most importantly, we've had the funding and support to do what we need to with this. Since the counties that are all different levels of data completeness, some had a lot of work to do and some didn't have as much. So without equal funding for all of us, that would have made it much harder to get through and do this together. So some of the things that from the previous slide of talking about issues, our group was able to work together quite well and decisions on all of them. So as I mentioned, we decided to use the draft NENA data model. We decided not to wait until it was complete, and 3 years later, I'm glad we made that decision because we would still be waiting. We're obviously prepared to make any data model changes we need to once it's official, but we didn't want that to hold us back. We also decided to use the PennDOT county boundary layer. Boundaries in Pennsylvania are a complicated topic, and I'm not going to go into that right now, other than to say it was best that we all use the state DOT county boundary layer, and not squabble over who had the best one and which county layer we should be using. That helped move things along very quickly as well. It also worked out well to move to the Amazon Web Services and AGOL. That took away the problem of worrying about what county is going to host the software and the hardware and do maintenance on it and own it. We've had other projects not related to GIS where things fell apart in that arena just because that was a lot of stress on one county and then the other counties didn't have as big of a role to play. So going with the web-based, the cloud-based with a vendor to help us has taken a lot of that stress and that drama away from all of this, and that has been excellent. So we chose to have vendor support for the setup of the Amazon Web Services and the ETL tools due to our time constraints of all the GIS staff members involved in the project, and this support has really enabled us to make progress at a much faster rate than we would have been able to on our own. So here I'm going to hand it off to Andrew Smart to talk about our technical solutions.
Okay, so I'm going to discuss the solution that we came up with for this project. As Stacey said, we decided to leverage both ArcGIS Online and the Amazon Web Services Cloud. So the workflow we came up with is to basically use ArcGIS Online as an intermediary to push data and pull data from each of the county participants. One of the reasons we went this direction was that each of the county participants are already invested in ArcGIS Online, and so everybody's already familiar with the platform and is comfortable working with the ArcGIS Online tools. So with the workflow that we're following, each county uploads their data set to ArcGIS Online as a repository every month. The next step we go to is that our process kicks off on Amazon, pulls all the data from ArcGIS Online to an Amazon EC2 instance, and incorporates the power of Amazon with the ArcGIS platform using Data Reviewer, Python, SQL Server, and SAS tools that are available on Amazon to analyze the data sets, pull the data sets together into a common NENA data model, perform data reviewer checks, and produce results that are then sent back to each participant. When the analysis is finished, the data set, regionalized data set is created. Statistics are generated based on what was found during the analysis, and then the results are posted back to ArcGIS Online where everybody can retrieve the results. This also posts back a web map so that users of this organization, this group that are not necessarily GIS-centric users, have a nice, easy interface to be able to look at the results of the data, look at any errors that are found, see how the data is coming together, see how it's progressing over time. The final step in this process that we follow is that the results are sent via email and notifications to each of the participants in the group. So an email notice is sent to say the results are available, where they can be found on ArcGIS Online, statistics about what was found during the analysis run, so how many errors were found with Data Reviewer, what types of errors were found, and did each county upload a data set or not, and all that's sent back to each user of this group, and that completes the process. So this process runs right now on a monthly basis. It's been scaled up and scaled down to run on a weekly basis at times. Right now we're running on a monthly basis, but using the flexibility of cloud tools, combination of ArcGIS Online and Amazon, we're able to support this in a common environment, so that one of the reasons we went to this direction was that we don't have to worry about any one organization hosting this platform and this analysis service. It's all hosted in a neutral environment so that everybody can take advantage of the power of the tools, but nobody has to necessarily worry about hosting the analysis and all the connections and processes that have to happen to produce the results. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Stacey to talk about the outcomes of the process.
So now that we have a regional centerline layer that is updated regularly, we are working to make use of it in other ways and not just hold it back waiting for NextGen 911. We made such a big investment in this layer that there's no reason for it to wait until NextGen is in place. We can make it available to other county departments, first responders, and the public. So some of the options that I think we're going to be looking at with it is sharing it with open data. Chester County and Philadelphia both have open data sites, so that the data will be available there. There's a Fusion Center in Philadelphia that can use it as well. Knowledge Center, which is an incident and event management software used by many counties in Pennsylvania, can take advantage of it as well. So there are a lot of uses for it that we don't want to just have it behind closed doors at this point. So some of the other things that we're doing with it now that we have it, as Andrew mentioned, the data reviewer process, we are working to go through and fix the mistakes that have been found, the errors. So that is going slower than Andrew wants it to at this point, and I understand that. But some of the issues are, a big one is segment line length. There's some that are in the NENA standard, smaller than what the NENA standard says is acceptable, but when people have reviewed their data, there are valid reasons for why they haven't mapped that way. So we're really working through a lot of those individually and then as a group, deciding which ones that maybe would become exceptions and which things are things that need to be fixed as we move forward with all of it. So our centerline data is just going to keep getting better and better as we go through this process. Another thing that we're working on is road name standardization across boundaries. You can see here going from Chester County into Montgomery County, the Pennsylvania Turnpike is designated very differently between the two. So that is something that we need to work on together and decide what the standard is and if everyone will agree to use it. Also, there's, the conversation can be, would you use it internally or regionally only? So there's a lot of nuances to it, but you can see one has eastbound and westbound and the other one doesn't at all. So an example is dispatchers in Chester County, when they have something come up that goes into Montgomery County, I know they don't like it because they don't have the bounding direction there that they're used to. So the things like that we need to work through as a group, and we certainly are doing that. We're also going to be working at some of the edge matching, making that a little bit better as we go. Each time we do an update and move some things, it's going to look better. Some situations we have it where one road coming from one county is shown as single lane, and then from the other county it's dual lane. So we need to look at those and agree on how they're going to be mapped and shown and work through that. Also, sharing coincident roads with county boundaries. We have a lot of those where there might be different names depending on which side of the road you're on and which county you're in, and address ranges and some of the address points. So that's something that we're looking at this year as well. So another big effort that we're going to be taking on next is building address data points for the region. We're not very far in that effort now, but that's the next big thing on our list. We also have a regional pictometry flight going on right now that will help with that effort. And we also are going to put our response zone data into the NENA data model in the cloud and have it available regionally as well this year. So listed there are all the project participants. They obviously couldn't all be on the call today, but everyone has worked really hard and put a lot of effort into this, so I want to thank them all for that. A couple things I did want to note. Change takes time, especially for county government, and our process for the region was set up the way that it was to allow each of the counties the time they need to make these changes permanently in their systems moving forward without disrupting what's in place. And I think that's a huge factor to why we were successful with this regional center line. We aren't forcing people to change their internal data at this point. We're letting them plan their path forward and make those changes on a more appropriate schedule for what their other dependencies are. And then the other item is that our process for this is expected to evolve as the technology evolves, especially the Esri piece. Maybe in a few years we'll be doing portal to portal for communication and collaboration rather than using AGOL like we are now. Who knows, but we're very open to the changes and improvements that will be coming, and I can expect to see the group working like it has been moving forward, making all the decisions together and getting where we need to go with it. So thank you for your time today. If you have any questions, please feel to reach out to Andrew and I, and we would be glad to get back to you.
That's great. Thank you so much. Stacey and Andrew, there are a couple of questions that you may want to answer now, or we can send something out. I'll let you choose. But first was, how did you enforce the use of standards with those who have collaborated on the project with you?
Well, I would say that we've done that right now in that it's in the regional data set, and we've enforced it by not forcing them to do it in their own data yet. People were willing to collaborate together and put it in the region, and like I said, take the time to get their data to where it needs to go. And I think everybody recognizes that the NENA standard, while not final, will be the standard, and I think everyone sees the benefit of moving forward with this.
Great, thank you. And then one other question that came up was, can you describe how the data between your 911 database and PennDOT is coordinated today?
Sure. It's not. That's an area where I think we're behind in some sense. Like, this data can be available to PennDOT if they want to implement it, but right now each county maintains their own centerline layer. Whether they've incorporated parts of PennDOT or not, I think it depends on the county. Everyone's different right now with that, but in general, there's not a one-for-one sharing right now.
Okay, thank you. Well, what a great example of leveraging portal capability and extending out the platform so that people can maintain their own authoritative data and yet share it up for the common good. We really appreciate what you've provided here today. So Stacey and Andrew, thank you so much. Scott, there was a question regarding whether all of this needs to be contained within a geodatabase, or what maybe the best practice would be. Could you maybe take a moment on that? And then I don't know if you had any specific questions that you would like to share group-wise.
Sure, yeah. So the address data management map does help users organize their address data in a geodatabase and use that as kind of the repository for that transactional editing. But then you can share that information out. Like Chris showed you how you could share that information out in some simple layers that could be used in field workflows and even the address crowdsourcing solution. But the kind of authoritative repository starts in a geodatabase and then can be pushed out to other systems through a couple different ways. And kind of how you do that depends on the systems you're trying to integrate with. But that's typically how we see it implemented.
Great. And then did you have any questions that came up, Scott, that you'd like to share with the entire group?
There were quite a few questions, Mike, on one of the questions we got was kind of how does the addressing solution work if I have an addressing grid in my community? And I just wanted to kind of point out that as you're assigning new site addresses, you'll see that it's relying on the ranges that you place on your center lines. And so you could think about your center lines as kind of a physical implementation of that addressing grid, and as you're creating new center lines, you can then use that grid as a reference layer. You can also use parcels. Another question we had is, I just kind of freehand drew in that center line, and thankfully many people called me on and said, well, Scott, wouldn't you have parcel data or at least the right-of-ways that show where that road is? And absolutely, right? You could have that in a scan drawing that's used for reference in your drawing. Or in your ArcMap session, I should say, or you could actually have your digital parcel data if that information's coming in kind of the same frequency in which your center lines and addresses are for that development. And so there's a variety of ways you can kind of use that reference data to kind of get the new center lines in, ensure they are within the right-of-way casements, and then ultimately the integrity of that data is maintained. The other question we had, Mike, is that there were some questions on kind of what versions of ArcGIS do we support. All of that is documented on the solution site as you guys begin to dig in and look deeper at the solutions. The data management solution we showed was available with ArcGIS 10.3 through 10.5. And so it supports a real wide variety of kind of versions there. And the solutions and that same goes for the data reviewer solution that Chris showed you. And the address crowdsourcing and address field verification solutions can be used with ArcGIS Online. Or you can use them with your ArcGIS Enterprise or Portal for ArcGIS implementation. So you've got a variety of kind of deployment options there depending on how you're kind of architecting ArcGIS in your organization. Those are the big ones, Mike. We had some more detailed questions.
Great, thank you. I know that we offer some customized training when people ask for it, but are there specific training items that might help people jump into this that are at any level of experience?
Well, we certainly have done some meetups with some detailed recordings of the solutions themselves, and all of the documentation on how to deploy it and use the solutions is available on the solution site. We don't have Esri-sponsored classes per se, but certainly we can, if users have specific needs in that area, we've had engagements where they've contacted their Esri rep and, people have come in to help them do that and get started and do a deeper dive. And then ultimately there's partners available too that can help them with that. So there's a kind of a variety of ways that folks can get the help they need.
Great. Well, thank you. And a reminder to everyone, you can get basic through advanced training at esri.com/training. And with your licensing, all of the online training now is free. So please take advantage of that because there's a great way for you to get the experience you need. Or just reach out to us and we'll be happy to line you up with some folks who can help you either on a case-by-case or on a more global way. We wanted to just let you know and remind you that Esri has worked pretty hard on the public safety team to come up with enterprise licenses for organizations specific to public safety. So if your PSAP is serving a number of different agencies, you may find that some of that licensing is very favorable, beginning even with every bit of software we can provide you. So that's a great deal. We also have created an optional public safety ArcGIS Online named user program. And the thing that's exciting about that is it takes into account the responsibility you have for working shifts and enables you to have people throughout the organization have named user accounts while still keeping the number of licenses that you actually pay for low to reflect just the amount of people you have on a specific shift. The really nice thing about this is that if the Emergency Operations Center is activated for any kind of simulated or real emergency, those named users spin up to infinity. You can use as many as you need. So it gives you the ability to train and prepare, and then in a real event, share with everyone without having to pay anything additional. So that's pretty exciting. In conclusion, again, thank you, everyone. We would invite you to look at the public safety webinar series that are available. You can find those online by looking at Esri Public Safety Webinars. My email is listed here. You could reach out with any specific questions, and I'll get those to the individual presenters today if they're specific. And then we would invite you to join us at our National Security Summit and International User Conference in July. This is an amazing event. We get nearly 17,000 people to our user conference each year, and it is just literally Woodstock for geeks. So please come and join us there. We also will be at APCO, the IACP conference, and others that are listed here, NENA and IACP's technology conference. So we look forward to seeing you in July at our next webinar, and again in early July at the user conference. Thanks, everyone, and we hope you have a great day.